Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Lakewood City Council study session in the city of Lakewood, Colorado on May 21st, 2018 at 7 p.m. in council chambers. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Hall.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Vincent.
Here.
Vita. Franks.
Here.
Roybal.
Here.
Gutwein.
Here.
Skilling.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
Abel. LeBure.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to welcome everybody who came out tonight. I see some bright colors, which means that we're going to celebrate something really exciting and then dig into maybe something a little bit more challenging. But we're going to kick this off with Miss Alexis Moore to talk about the opening of the Art Line. And while she's coming down, if you have been over in the Colfax area, and you've seen some pretty exciting things going on. So follow the green line.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you very much for allowing me a few minutes on the agenda tonight to share a bit of the story of the 40 West Art Line, a very exciting project that is about to launch in just a couple of weeks. And just a couple quick things before I get started. Tonight's presentation is purely informational. There's no request for council action, so I just want to make sure that you're all aware of that. And then I also would like to just take a moment before I start, if I could, please, to recognize we have a number of folks in the room, as the mayor alluded to. We've called our Art Line champions. And if you all wouldn't mind just standing up, please, for a moment so we can recognize all of you. This group of individuals and a whole lot more who aren't able to be with us tonight have dedicated countless hours, time, creativity, energy over the past almost 2 years to help to create the Art Line vision and to launch this inspirational project. So I would just like to share my gratitude with all of them and everyone else.
I know. I broke the rule right off the bat.
Uh-oh, right? No.
From now on.
All right, good to know. So thank you all so much. Just to orient folks on this project, I know this map is difficult to see probably at home, but the map is on the project website, which is the 40westartline.org, and everybody in the chambers has a copy of the map itself. The 40 West Art Line is approximately a 4-mile walking and biking arts experience that meanders through the heart of the state-certified 40 West Arts Creative District. Geographically, Colfax Avenue runs through the center of it, and it's located approximately midway between Wadsworth Boulevard and Sheridan. It runs about a couple blocks north and south of Colfax and connects 3 major parks: Aviation Park, Walker Branch Park, and Mount Air Park, with the W Line Light Rail, the Lamar Station, numerous 40 West Arts District amenities, galleries, and local businesses and historic neighborhoods in this area. The idea for creating the Art Line, it was originally called an Arts Loop, and it originated back in 2011 while we were working with the community on Lamar Station area planning efforts for the W Line, and really the creation of the 40 West Arts District itself. And the community talked a lot about the importance of the parks that I just mentioned in this neighborhood, and trying to activate those parks and transform the built environment and make it a place that people want to walk and bike and get together and celebrate their neighborhood. They talked about the idea of literally painting a green line on the ground, similar to the red line of the Boston Freedom Trail, if any of you have experienced that. And that was incorporated into that plan, which was adopted by council in 2012, and subsequent plans since that time. We got a huge boost in moving that forward when we received a very competitive grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. The City of Lakewood and 40 West Arts, as our nonprofit partner, were awarded at the highest amount of $100,000 and started the 2-year grant process in July of 2016. And it was really the catalyst for moving the entire implementation and visioning for the Art Line forward. And I just want to touch on, I think, the importance of creating the 40 West Art Line. Obviously, it is implementing years of community vision and ideas to create this type of amenity along the West Colfax Avenue corridor in Lakewood. It also touches on a lot of the other elements that you see in front of you. It's really, I think, the next big thing in the revitalization of West Colfax Avenue and continuing to build upon all the positive momentum that is happening in that part of the community, thanks to the dedication of many of the people in this room and hundreds of others out in the Lakewood community. The art line is already, I think, enhancing the sense of place and beautification of this area of Lakewood. Has immense opportunities for economic benefits and marketing of businesses to say that they're located on the 40 West Art Line. And this area of Lakewood has traditionally been underrepresented in terms of access to parks and access to the arts. And I think that by creating the art line, we're building a free outdoor gallery experience that anybody from any walk of life, regardless of your age, your income, your ability, is able to get outside and be invigorated by and experience and enjoy. And hopefully will help to lead to opportunities to improve public health by encouraging more walking and biking in the area, more social interaction within the community. And I just want to note that we're certainly not unique in Lakewood in trying to create this type of an amenity. There are many national models that I'm sure many of you have already had the chance to experience, from the red line of the Boston Freedom Trail, from the very highly engineered and wonderful Indianapolis Cultural Trail, Atlanta Beltline, the New York City High Line. Obviously, the scale of these projects is much larger and more substantial than the art line is, but I think they all have similar things in common in terms of building community, beautifying spaces that are perhaps underutilized, and working within existing infrastructure to beautify those environments. And they've all been, I think, far exceeded expectations of return on investment, both from the economic benefit side of things, but also visitorship and placemaking within these communities. Closer to home, I just want to mention the 5280 Loop and the 303 Artway, which are projects that are in planning and development phases in Denver, and very similar to the art line, kind of different contexts that they're celebrating, but hopefully down the road we can look at connecting all of these and really creating a unique regional asset for the Denver metro area. In terms of the implementation of the art line itself, I'm not going to get into this list, but I just want to highlight the fact that we've had so many amazing stakeholders and partners at the table, both during the visioning process for the art line and the implementation process as well. Again, just a huge shout out of gratitude to the art line champions. We had many other groups as well that have been involved in various points in the project, from the dozens of folks who turned out with Mayor Paul and did walk and bike rides along the art line route last year to look at opportunities and identify potential challenges that we needed to address, to the volunteer art selection panel that consisted of residents from every ward in the city of Lakewood, as well as actually a resident from Edgewater who lives right over the border and wanted to get involved, who helped to select the public art, initial public art for the project, which then went to the Lakewood Public Art Committee for final approval. It's really been inspiring, I think, to see the collaboration across many, many sectors of the community. This is just a quick snapshot of the art line by some of the numbers, and I won't get into these details, but I do want to highlight a few things at the bottom of the list that I think are really unique and special to this project. A 4-mile route is very long to try to activate with public art, obviously, and we don't have a lot of right-of-way along the 4 miles. And so the community identified a number of locations where public art would be appropriate on private property. And of those 12 locations, every single property owner said, yes, we would like to work with you on this. We're excited to beautify our property with public art and to be a part of the art line story. And many of those, I would say 90% of them, had never worked with the city or the arts district or the business improvement district on any sorts of projects previously. So it's been unique and fun to engage with sectors of the population that we don't always get to work with. We've hired almost 24 artists to help with this initial phase of installing art on the Art Line project, and overall have 70 new public art installations that are coming in this month and throughout the month of June. With that, it really all adds up to one new unique amenity for the city of Lakewood. And now the fun stuff. The two kind of big buckets of things that you are going to see on the art line. The first is wayfinding. We heard a lot from the community that it's important that people don't get lost as they're navigating this experience. So we are installing a green line, as the community originally envisioned, along that entire 4-mile route, and over 60 wayfinding signs with directional and distance information to key destinations. And I just want to point out Jefferson County Public Health generously funded this portion of the project, so that's been a unique partnership as well. And then the art itself. There are 5 kind of categories of art that you will see coming along the line. The biggest part of the project is allocated to the art in the parks, going back to that significance of activating those 3 parks along the route. And the artist team that was selected to do the art in the parks, I think really took the community input to heart. You'll see a few slides where I have the orange text in italics. And this was direct language that we heard from the community about what they envisioned for the art line, what they wanted to see. And I think these artists and the public art selection committee that selected them did an amazing job of honoring that vision with land art in Aviation Park. And I guess I should mention before I go too much further, the artists were inspired by the Stegosaurus, the Colorado State dinosaur. And like I said, land art in Aviation Park, kinetic, movable art in Mount Air Park, and functional bench art sculptures in Walker Branch Park. And these have all just been installed in the last couple of weeks, and the artists are finalizing those details in the next day and tomorrow. So those are almost completed. We also heard people wanted kind of art treasures and fun, unexpected discoveries along the art line. And we have 3 really unique interactive sculptures that I just encourage you to go out and interact with them and experience them for yourselves. They're very unique, and I think the community took the idea of kind of creating an experience and interactive to heart with the selection of these sculptures. There are a lot of fences in the area that we're really seeing as opportunities. As I mentioned, working with some of those private property owners to clean up some of those areas and to work with artists to transform some of those fences with art. There are 6 sites where you'll see fence art along the route. These are renderings of 3 of those sites. And I just want to point out 3 of them alone are located on Lakewood Place, which is a 1-block stretch just north of Colfax between Reed and Pierce Streets. And those will be unveiled at the June 1st launch celebration that I'll just mention in a moment. We also, when we asked, how can we encourage you and make it interesting for you to walk or bike this 4-mile route and to bring your family and friends out, time and again we heard that people wanted to see artists painting the sidewalks, working with the community to paint murals and add art to the existing infrastructure. And we've just started in the past week doing what we call kaleidoscope crossings with a professional artist and dozens of community volunteers at 10 intersections along the art line. Hiring artists to do unique art murals and interactive game murals at a number of locations. And then finally, the last bucket of art is something that I think is really creative and amazing, and it's a great story of the collaboration between the community and our community resources department, and specifically a staff member there who's an artist and landscape architect who created this amazing idea of what we call the Artline Story Totems. And these address some of the community concerns about lighting, about making this experience constantly evolving, and kind of a scavenger hunt. These are 4-sided, about 6-foot tall sculptures. There are 11 of these Artline Story Totems on the route. 2 sides have the 40 West brand panel, the Artline brand. They're internally illuminated with a solar panel, and then the other 2 sides are removable art panels. So these will be experiences that can constantly evolve and change. They'll provide some lighting and a warmth to the environment. And the first set of panels are really kind of beautiful aluminum metal panels cut with dinosaurs hidden within the artwork for people to find along the route. So with that, I would just like to note that you've all received a commemorative book line for the Artline launch. We really hope that you're all able to join us on First Friday, June 1st on that Lakewood Place stretch. We're working closely with 40 West Arts District during their big district-wide art walk celebration with RIMCAD, the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. A number of things happening. Of course, that's the first night of Inspire Arts Week in Lakewood, so we're really tying all of this together to be a large community celebration. The mayor will be doing a dedication of the Artline as well at Mount Air Park Community Farm on Saturday, June 9th, which is another event that will be great to attend. Some of the artists will be working and finishing up their art installations at that time. And I just want to note that this is not the end. This is just the beginning. This is the launch of something really amazing that's been an incredible process with the community. And I'm excited to see in the coming years how this continues to grow and evolve. For anyone who is interested, there's a lot more information on the website and the Facebook page. We're planning some walk and bike tours along the route this summer as well, based on what we've heard from the community. So with that, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well done. Thank you. So before I go to council questions, if you want to take a seat real quick. We have what's listed as public comment, but we actually do it different at study sessions. It's actually public input. So it gives you the opportunity to be like you were sitting up here and ask questions or participate. And 3 minutes, so this little box here will be green like the art line until 2.5 minutes, yellow at 2.5, and then it will go red at 3, and we'll politely try to wrap you up, or Margie has a button, we'll drop you into the basement. That's how we're dealing with this now. So I have a couple people that have signed up to speak, and not surprising, I have Miss Maddie Nichols. Yeah. Hi, Maddie. Nice to see you.
Nice to see all of you. My name is Maddie Nichols. I live at 5800 West 8th Avenue, and I've lived in this area for over 50 years. And I can't say enough for what a great community effort the Art Line has been. Businesses, residents, 40 West Arts, WCCA, everybody has been a part of this planning, and like all things, it takes time, but this has been a great effort on the parts of a lot of people. The city has been very supportive of this whole project. And it's not only the neighborhoods surrounding Colfax that are being affected by this. I just helped painting some of the kaleidoscope crossings. If you haven't seen those are super great. But there were people from all areas of the city of Lakewood who helped do this. So it's not just in the Northwest area that people are looking at making this happen. So the other thing I want to do is to thank Alexis, who has been the moving force for this whole project, and her crew with the city, and all the many meetings we've had for putting this all together. And she's coordinated all those pieces to make this come together to be a reality. So I really want to give her and the people who have helped her a lot of credit for making this happen. And we're super excited about it happening, and I can't wait for the block party. Come and see that there's going to be a dinosaur flash mob, if you know what that is. So it'll be an exciting time for everybody.
Thank you. Alexis, you got a silent hand ovation, just so you know. Pretty cool. Mr. Strunk, come on down. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council members. I guess I'm a little taller than Maddie. My mother taught me that brevity is next to godliness, so my comments are going to be rather brief. But I did want to let you know and thank you for your progressive leadership of this city. I've lived here a little less than 3 years. I live at 815 South Carr, and have been very impressed with what the city has done. I had an opportunity to go to the Citizens Planning Academy this last fall, which you have a great planning department, and I've been able to interface with 4 or 5 people in that department, in addition to Alexis Moore, who's just an extraordinary asset for the city. And I've been very impressed, too, with the relationship that you've forged with 40 West and Bill Marino. It's really exciting to live here. And so I just wanted to say you've got a great city staff, and thank you so much for what you do for all the residents of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So that exhausts the roster. Anybody else? That's a first. I'll close it. I was looking at Mr. Marino. All right, so I'll go to council. We feel the energy. Councilor Vincent.
I'd just like to say thank you. I mean, this has been a long process, and it's great. And the interaction that is with all the other pieces of the art and the art line and the bid and West Colfax. And for those of you who haven't been, I'd encourage you to. I was walking the other day, and all of a sudden I went, I'm on a green line. I wonder where it goes. Now, I should have known, right? But it was very, very effective. So I think what was so exciting about this project is that it brought a lot of people, different people in the community together, not just the same people, and they were very excited about it. I also think it was a good brainstorm to have the first meeting at Westfax. There's something about Westfax that brings people together. So I'd just like to say thank you and job well done. And how much fun it is to have a study session like this where everybody's happy. I just...
Thank you. The night's early. Mr. LeBeer.
Yeah, I was just going to say, jellyfish, dinosaurs, all the fun stuff is happening in Ward 2. So I recommend you all come down. I think we should have a official meeting at some point at Casa Bonita still and watch some, cave diving. But anyway, yeah, I'm really excited about this. I've been able to witness a lot of the changes. I live right off of Lamar Street. So obviously there's been a lot of work done on Lamar, and it's good to see. It's just good to see the changes, and I think it's very exciting. And it's also exciting to see the new businesses coming in. So I think it's a great opportunity. I'm excited about it, and I'm trying to express myself in a way that conveys that energy right now, but I'm also a little bit exhausted. But thanks a lot for coming.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I grew up at 14th and Pierce, and my dad was an artist. He was actually a genius when it came to art. Maddie, I'm so sorry he's not here to be here with you right now in person, because frankly, he'd be right next to you helping you. I'll try and do better too.
Ms. Gutwein.
I just love it. I think it's so exciting. So thank you so much for all the work that everyone has put into this. It's amazing to see it come to fruition, and I can't wait for the opening. So thank you all so much.
Drabel.
I mean, how can you not like it? But the main point I want to make is that I will go to Casa Bonita if Councilman LeBure does the cave diving.
I'll do that.
I'm there.
All right. Well, this is really cool. And in fact, it dawned on me, the coolness of it. There's a lot of angst, and sometimes this job can be challenging. And I think if you tune into council, we spend a lot of time together, quality time. But sometimes you deal with kind of the negativity in the community, and just being out in your neck of the woods, in your neighborhood, and to see that color and to see that vibrancy start to pop, and to see a community that was in a lot of ways where some of the angst is now in other areas of the city. Two Creeks was in that years ago and said, how are we going to change this? What are we going to do? How are we going to blaze the trail and envision a future for our neighborhood? And it's coming to life in just a spectacular way. And you talked about the free gallery and the equity. In a neighborhood where sometimes people are underserved, you'll have this great amenity that will be free, and you'll have kids at some of our most impacted elementary schools within walking distance to all these great amenities, and to be able to have that exposure. So this is just the beginning of something that's going to be fantastic for years to come. And, you talked about how, well, we're not quite like this and that, not yet, but we'll get there. And so I'm really excited. I can't wait to get out there. 70 different art installations, and I know some of the artists are even from Lakewood. One's from Green Mountain High School, Shay Davis. I'll throw that plug in, which is going to be pretty cool. And then lastly, I got to say this. So the collaboration is the neighborhood, the 40 West, the Business Improvement District. But somebody who didn't get a clap, but you got the silent clap, and that's Alexis Moore and her dedication to this whole project. And she's been incredible. Roger, Travis, your whole team. So there you go. Yeah. Yeah. But you've really championed this and seen it through, and I'm really excited. So with that, thank you all very much. Thanks for coming out. And we'll see you on June 1st and June 9th. Fantastic. All right, next up is item 4, which is the development dialogue parking issue. Now, the actual presentation has been pulled. It's still on the agenda, or it's on my agenda. So I wanted to make sure if folks did come out tonight to address that, because there was a public input section, that you would have that opportunity to speak about parking. Nobody clearly has signed up because we don't have a sign-up sheet, but if you'd like to speak about that, I'd be happy to. Okay, there is. There is even a sign-up sheet. All right, so we'll move on to our next subject, which is going to be presentation and discussion on short-term rentals. Ms. Greer, it's a rarity. 3-minute time limit. Yes, who's keeping track now? Charlie, will you go down there and keep track?
Dare you to cut her off.
Our council technical guru.
Good evening. I want you to keep that enthusiasm up, okay? I actually have a very short presentation for you tonight, and it really just synopsizes and kind of summarizes what was in your packet regarding short-term rentals. And I want to thank Erin Bravo from our planning department. She's really the one who did all of the research, etc., until we decided it was time to maybe look at it from a licensing point of view. So Erin's here to answer questions when we're finished. 7 easy slides.
Short for short term.
Yeah, some of the background. In 2012, the city began receiving inquiries about being able, from our residents, from your constituents, about being able to use their home for short-term rentals. And it's continued, and it's not a named use in the zoning ordinance, and currently, because of that, they aren't allowed in the city of Lakewood. In 2016, when the planning department came with some zoning ordinance, proposed zoning ordinance amendments, they had short-term rentals as part of that. And city council at that time actually asked if they could remove those from the zoning the proposed zoning ordinance, and let staff gather some more information and make a recommendation back to you. So to date, we continue to receive lots of inquiries. It's been growing and growing. The planning staff researched other cities and what they're doing with their short-term rentals, and the matrix is attached to your staff report in your council agenda packets. And Erin put together citywide meetings, which we do with a lot of these issues when they come up. She included other people from the planning staff, the city clerk's office, finance department, economic development, code enforcement, and Gail Spencer from code enforcement is also in the audience tonight. And the city attorney's office to make sure that we're providing the best recommendation to all of you. She researched Fort Collins, Boulder, Denver, Durango, Arvada, Wheat Ridge, Littleton, Jefferson County, and even reached out to Nashville and Santa Fe at the request of council to go outside of the metro area. And some of the things that we looked at was simply, do these cities allow them or not allow them? Are they allowed for primary residents only, or both primary and non-primary residents? If they had any license requirements, concentration limits, zoning limitations, and fees. Along with that research, we contacted a company called iCompass. They're one of 3 or 4 municipal software companies that actually help track short-term rentals by all of their advertisements on the rental websites. And they came to us, and they currently show 338 short-term rentals in Lakewood already. So people who are operating without a license illegally, because we don't have it in our code. And one of the main things is that Lakewood's not receiving our sales and use tax or our lodgers tax on these rentals. There's no regulations currently in place for short-term rentals. So after staff met, these are some of our recommendations. We suggest that you allow and license short-term rentals in the city of Lakewood. We would like for them to be allowed in all residential zones and allow rental of the primary residence only. This will stop. Some of the comments we heard from council before was people coming in, buying up property specific for short-term rentals. If they only are allowed to rent their residence only, that'll put a stop to that. And a contract with a vendor to provide those addresses on an ongoing basis, so we know who's out there advertising, so we can get them licensed and into our system. As part of the licensing application, we'd ask for them to provide one off-street parking space for the renters. And they must prove that they've gone to our finance department, have a sales and use tax and a lodger's tax license. Provide us with a 24/7 local emergency contact. Make sure that they have additional insurance requirements to include renter's insurance. There would be no in-house entry or inspections by city staff at all. And of course, we would include a complaint hearing and appeal process in that ordinance. So next steps is up to you, whether you want to allow them or not allow short-term rentals in the city. If you allow them, we're suggesting that we spend the month of June doing some community outreach and getting some input from the citizens so we know exactly what their concerns are, and then go to a first reading and second reading with public hearing.
All right. Nice and easy, nice and short and easy. Okay, so we're going to do the same. Mr. and Mrs. Cisneros, you've signed up to give us some input on this and would welcome you down. Good evening.
I didn't really realize what I signed up for back
Oh.
there. I thought I was signing in,
Okay.
just to come to the meeting to see what it was all about. But we live at 9009 West 7th Place, and we've been thinking about doing an Airbnb. We have some unique ideas that we would like to bring to Lakewood or to the community. I would like to have, I want to say, like a classy type Airbnb where we live. We live on an acre, literally in the park. So we live next to the park at
Ebert Park.
Ebert.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Garrison.
Yep.
Right. So in conjunction with the Green Line, that would be kind of awesome, to be part of that, and just have people, come to our Airbnb and enjoy it. Let me see what I was going to say here. I'm like shocked that I'm in front here, but
Take your time. You're doing great.
I think, in terms of the Airbnb, we want to be, on the up and up, and we want to be honest and, be honest people of the community and, do the Airbnb. And we kind of have some ideas where we want to, my daughter kind of mentioned being beekeepers. And so what we wanted to do was like kind of do that with the Airbnb and serve coffee and like maybe sopapillas at our place, when they come to our Airbnb. And that's not all, but I'm not going to mention those because, those are just kind of ideas that we have and, that we would like to implement. But in terms of that, I'm all for it. I've stayed at Airbnbs. I've stayed at one in New Orleans, and it's kind of neat. You go there, You stay your time. You don't have to deal with actual renters, coming in, ruining your place. I mean, they have, a responsibility to your place if they're going to stay there. And you get their credit card, when you do an Airbnb. And I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but I mean, obviously it was 338 people that have one. And we'd like to be part of that.
Great.
So, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm Julius Cisneros. And we just wanted to, comply with any kind of ordinance or be part of that maybe planning committee. And also because we don't want the city to just become some kind of party place. I mean, we're hoping the people that come, that are, they bring.
They'd bring revenue to our, to our city.
Sure.
Bring revenue.
Yep.
But, and then we want to be good neighbors, so we don't want to turn our house into some kind of party house and then just,
I know. We
have
appreciate
neighbors
that.
and the police coming all the time. So maybe by there being certain rules, when we list the rules, when people come and rent, then they know right off the
What's
bat
expected.
and
Yeah.
that it's not a free-for-all, anything goes. And so, because we
Great.
kind of want to be,
And we're entrepreneurs, and we've been entrepreneurs for a very long time, and we work our butts off, and so we just kind of try to make things easier for our lives, and that's pretty much why we're here.
We appreciate your feedback.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Me too. Anybody else? Yes, come on down. Could you just give us your name? I know we have you on file, but your name and
Lori Nicat
Thank
at
you.
433 Wright Street. I live in a townhouse condominium complex, and on Wright Street, it's near Union Ridge Park. There are approximately 120 units there, with 42 units being townhouses and the remainder condominiums. Close to 50% of the units are owner-occupied and 50% are rentals. We have been experiencing short-term rentals for a few years now, even like 1 month at a time. Our bylaws say that it must be rented, the full unit must be rented for no less than 30 or 90 days. And so we have discovered Airbnb units in the place. The real problem with being in a townhouse or condominium complex is the parking. And the owners sometimes have only one parking space of their own, and some have two. So what we've had is that they park in wherever they want to, and we don't have enough parking for people that already live there. The streets are already crowded with parking. I can see doing this in a house where you own the whole thing. You have extra parking. You have a place for people to be. But what it's leading to is people buying a condominium unit or a townhouse unit and then just using it for an Airbnb, which we don't want that we've already discussed it in our HOA meetings, and it's not something we really want to do, try to keep track of it. We know where they're advertising some of the time. We can find them. It's just hard to figure out which unit they're doing and then change that. So I can see having it, I can see doing it, but not necessarily in a condominium and townhouse complex where there is such a lack of parking. In some of the units that are supposed to be rented for 90 days, one woman was having people come and stay for a month. We finally had her read the report, the rules, and then she has consented and is now renting hers for 90 days at a time. And that doesn't have anything to do with Airbnb, but I think it's the thing of it is when people are in and out of your community all the time like that, you don't have a sense of community. And half of us are owners, only half of us are owners that occupy them. So it's already a feeling that people move in and out, in and out, in and out a lot. So I think our community just isn't the place for that, but I have no problem with it being where there is space and people can do that. But I definitely think that their neighbors should be consulted before they do it and see what they think too. I think that we need to be able to comment on it.
Is your HOA able to ban it? So,
Yes.
okay, so you're able individually through your HOA to say that those
Yes.
properties aren't allowed?
Our attorney has written to one. He then, I think, was selling anyway, but it established for the next person that that was not permittable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the feedback. Okay. We will go to questions. Ms. Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I've got some questions that would be around where we talked earlier, and I don't know if we can back up to the slide on the recommendations. I think that'll help kind of to a reference point. Great. And so the first question I have is allow rental of primary residence only. What are the criteria, or have we, or do those need to be established to say what would be a primary residence and how we would track that? Do we have some context around that, thinking that people can have a primary home, a secondary home, number of months in residence? How is that going to play out?
We talked about that quite a bit, and we're suggesting that it's 6 months, that they have to live there at least 6 months, and there's a whole list of kind of proof to that, and they're only allowed to have one primary residence. And a lot of that, it can be based on where their voter registration is, utility bills, different types of things to make sure that they do live there at least 6 months. So they can't rent it out more than 6 months.
And so that kind of brings to the second point. So let's say that I have a 5-bedroom home and I'm a single woman living there, which isn't my situation, but and then can I rent 4 individual reservations? So basically I have 4 different reservations. So I actually have maybe 4 additional cars coming, and we're only requiring 1 off-street space. Is that per renter, I guess I didn't understand the provide 1 off-street. Was that per room, per person, per what?
It's actually per rent or per lease agreement.
Okay, so if they had
have
4
4
different
bedrooms, they
engagements.
have 4 off-site parking
Gotcha.
spaces.
Wanted to understand that. And then is there any limit on the number of people? Is there like a square footage limitation? I mean, could I have a 1-bedroom and then have bunk beds in there and have like 8 people in one room? Is there any limitation that would be for fire, for safety, that we would want to at least make sure people weren't exceeding those numbers?
I'm not sure. That's something we'd have to look into, whether we could or not.
Yeah.
That may just be through the individual lease. I'm not sure, but we could look into it.
Great, thank you. That was the extent of my questions at the time.
Mr. Beta?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions. You've made these recommendations, and the one on the top, first one is allow and license short-term rentals in the city of Lakewood. Other than the demand, there's obviously folks that are doing it now illegally, and as I think I understood you to say, you're getting inquiries from the public on it. Other than the demand, is there any other reason behind your recommendation? In other words, is there anything else I'm missing as to why you think this is a good thing for Lakewood?
I think that, I guess that's question is really up to you guys, whether, to council, whether they think it's good for Lakewood or not. And maybe Erin can even speak to that, because I know when we talked about, when she went through and looked at all the other cities, et cetera, it seemed to be a really kickoff for tourism in a lot of places. That people want to come here, they want to visit, they don't want to stay in a motel. They want to stay in a private home.
Was there any discussion or anything about the affordability of homes? Somehow this piggybacking with affordability for
There was
people?
no discussion of that.
Okay.
That's all.
Sorry, sir. Mr. Skilling.
So the 338 that we have, why do we have them? if we know where they are and we know they're operating, didn't we have the iCompass that tells
We met
us?
with them, and part of what we would purchase if we were going to rent them would be the module that they would give us all the addresses and keep us updated onto what's out there advertising on the website. We currently don't know where they're all at.
But we do know that, so they gave us the number, but they're holding hostage the addresses until we pay them their
Well,
subscription
that's
fee.
yeah. I mean, that's their program. That's part of what they do. So
I understand. I'm not.
that's their business.
Exactly. So my suggestion would be, so that's what I think I remember in the packet was $11,000 for the program. Is that, so for $11,000, we could learn who these 338 homes are for that amount of money, and we could either A, tax them or do something with them. B, we could send them a nasty letter and shut them down, or C, some combination of the two. We could do that for $11,000.
Annually, yes.
Oh, it's only per year? Okay. Have those 338, have we gotten complaints on them?
We've had 20, I'm going to look to Gail. I think we've had 23 complaints on short-term rentals in 5 years, 3 years.
Do you want to have her come down?
Gail, do you want to come down, Gail? And
Gail Spencer, Community Code Enforcement. Good evening. Since 2015, we've dropped 38 complaints on short-term rentals in Lakewood that we're aware of.
You know how many of those are unique to a certain address? Because we don't.
No, I know we've probably had a couple of complaints here and there, but these, I'm pretty safe to say they're individual. So.
Okay.
And then just to tag on broadly on the program, there are probably more out there, but that's what they could hone in at that point. So.
And what was I know there was the graphs in there about how much money the other cities make. There was that breakdown. Have we looked at, for example, the 338? Is there some approximation where if we were taxing those people, what kind of revenues that would bring in? Like just a ballpark.
we actually talked to iCompass about that a little bit, but since we don't know, even when they're out there advertising, the period of time that they've actually rented it or they're actually living there, they couldn't give us any kind of a ballpark.
Okay. And then if somebody had I know we don't have a lot of them here, but like a mother-in-law suite or something above the garage at their primary residence, is that something they could rent that out then all the time because it is their primary residence? It's just another building on their property.
I'm going to look to Aaron. I'm not sure. I don't know why not, but
I guess there's a distinction between real property and residence, maybe, is the
well, if it's
distinction.
an accessory dwelling unit, we wouldn't allow it.
Unless it's your primary residence. So how we've drafted it, just based on some of your comments and concerns, and obviously allowing them in all.
Talk into the mic, please. Thank you.
All residential neighborhoods. Hi, I'm Erin Bravo, by the way. It's nice to see you all. Looking at all residential zone districts, because we want to allow folks of all different walks of life to be able to take advantage of this if it's something that's going to make their lives and their housing a little bit more affordable, or if it's just something they want to partake in. But the primary residence component of it helps with the housing affordability and not having people come in and just have a home specifically for short-term rentals where you can make way more money potentially than renting out one of your rooms or something like that. So if it's a primary residence, if Margie had an ADU, but I was renting from her full time and she allowed me to, partake in the short-term rentals, that would be a potential option for me as her renter. But it would be on her on her property. And so I would be kind of at her whim to say if I would be allowed to do that or not. As we were framing it, that's how we were looking at it. If it's your primary residence and you've got a long-term lease or you're an owner, then you would have the opportunity to participate.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Margie.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I've actually got several questions, and I've got, this is 2 years old, but it's the CML document on best practices. And one of the things they were saying is that the operator must occupy the residence for at least 9 months a year, but you're recommending 6 months? Please talk about that a little bit.
It's just giving people the opportunity to rent longer and bring in more income for themselves.
Okay. Also, one of the best practices mentioned was that you do want to cap the numbers regarding how many folks can live in that short-term rental. And I think you've already answered, how do you effectively enforce regulations or not? Have you mentioned anything on that, Margie?
How we effectively enforce them?
Right,
now
if they
we
get a
can't.
call.
Right. I mean, right now everything's through code enforcement. But if they don't live up to the regulations or don't abide by the regulations that we put in the licensing ordinance, then we'd be able to revoke their license.
Okay. Another item on here is best practices is that the address must appear on the owner's voter registration. That might be something that
That's one of the criteria on the list is that the primary resident has voter registration at that address.
Okay, and has there been any discussion regarding occupancy being limited to how many unrelated people that can be in there versus related?
No, none at all.
Okay. I have a couple of other things I just wanted to ask about. You talked about 38 complaints since 2015. How does that break down regarding police calls versus just complaints that this is in their neighborhood and they wondered why, that kind of thing?
As far as actual police calls for service, we didn't dig down into a lot of that minutia, but looking at it, this is what code enforcement has addressed as far as short-term rentals. So some of it had to do with noise, parking issues, people coming and going, those types of things, but not breaking it down to like if somebody had a fight and they went out. We didn't pull a lot of that information out.
Illegal drugs, domestic violence,
correct,
kind of thing. So there might be more out there then.
Well, as far as that goes, there could be, but probably not a whole lot more. So
okay, but part of the let me keep going. Part of the recommendation is that you would notify the neighbors prior to any license.
I don't believe that's part of the recommendation at this point.
Oh, okay, then I must have read that.
I think
maybe that's part of CML. That's, I apologize. That's part of the best practices from CML.
Sure.
And I can't recall without rereading it what parameter that is as well. I'm just curious, since we've known that these are illegal in Lakewood, has there been any attempt to close them down? I mean, if it's illegal, it's illegal, and we know it's out there. We just kind of turn our head.
Yeah,
talk to me about that.
Sure. In code enforcement, we know that we could drive down every city block in Lakewood and find code violations. There's 4 code officers for the city, and they're assigned 4 different areas: the northwest, south, west, northeast, and northwest area of Lakewood. And 4 of us, we work to proactive or reactively listen to what the citizens want. And so these are what came to us due to the impact on residents. Some of these we can get things with code enforcement and illegal business, and we go out there and they say, well, we've been doing this for 5 years. Sometimes they fly under the radar. As far as the short-term rentals, I'm sure there's a number of them out there and they just fly under the radar. There's either minimal impact to the neighborhood, but when it comes up with either activity, noise, parking, who's coming and going, that type of stuff, and I guess the vigilance of the neighborhood, that's when we get involved. But we've got weeds growing down every city block in Lakewood, and I'm surprised. Obviously, our phones are ringing, but especially this time of year with something like that, it just depends on what's impacting them in their neighborhood.
Okay, maybe it's a question for Greg. We know that there's quite a bit of illegal activity, and we just talk to me. We just turn our backs on this and allow it. And what other instances are we doing the same thing for here in Lakewood, where we know there's illegal activity and we just kind of say, well, we're not going to deal with it?
Well, Counselor, I would suggest that you refer that question to the police department. The city attorney's office isn't in charge of enforcement. The police department is, and as you know, code enforcement is within the police department. Certainly, we advise the PD and code enforcement anytime there's an issue, but it's really up to them to decide what they enforce, when they enforce, how they enforce.
And so let me jump in, because we've had this response before. If code enforcement knows and they can prove it, it's enforceable. We don't know the exact addresses of who's doing it. Like you saw that map, we don't know exactly who's doing it. And I know from seeing the internal reports, when there have been complaints, it can be very challenging for you to prove that they're operating an Airbnb. So I don't think we're just blind to it. I think there's some challenges in trying to enforce it. And as you know, code enforcement is reactive, not proactive. So they're based on complaints. So if there's neighbors who don't have any problems, you're never going to hear about it, then nothing's going to happen.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, if you go and you actually have evidence that it's a short-term rental, I'd like to know if we're just turning our backs on that.
Ms. Spencer, then Mr. Abel, you had a follow-up, and then I have Ms. Harrison.
Ms. Spencer would stay there after she answers.
No, we do follow up on those, and we've followed up on a number of these that we got complaints on. And as one individual stated, we do follow up with a letter. It's actually not that mean. It's a nice letter saying, hey, are you aware? And or this is what we've got a complaint on, and usually it's immediate or within 30 days, depending on the context of what we end up hearing from the residents, and we try to work with them to get that resolved as soon as possible.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So when you know that there's one and it's illegal, then you do actually try and...
Yep, and we've been
That's all I wanted to
successful,
know.
I would say, with the majority of these as far as having them go away. Sometimes after 6 months. And like I said, there's probably a couple of these that we've had a couple of complaints on with the same address. I think that was asked as well. And we'll go back, we'll say, no, we really mean it.
Okay,
So.
thanks. That's just what I wanted. Also, would these be allowed in Salterra? You said all residential neighborhoods. It would be allowed there. Let me just say something. You were talking about the primary residence and renting it out. You know, if you're going to leave your home, the whole home, and rent it out, that just seems, for me, very peculiar. You got to take all your underwear out of your bedroom and all of your clothing out of the closets. I mean, it just seems like people are leaving themselves up to a lot of liability. And I understand that if you have a 5-bedroom home, that you maybe want to rent out 1 or 2 bedrooms. I get that, to kind of help backfill your mortgage. But probably in those rooms, you don't have all of your personal effects. This whole thing to me seems just a little bit I'm not connecting all the pieces, renting your home to strangers when you've got your personal things there.
Yeah, and you're not too far off. I mean, there's nationwide. I mean, you hear of things like this happening where personal items got stolen, things got trashed. So it happens.
Yeah. And I just...
So, Ms. Johnson, I have a full board. Could we keep getting
That's
through
fine.
some
I've
other
only got
things?
one more comment.
Okay, then we're going to move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For me, I appreciate that this would increase the tax base. But for me, this actually isn't about economic development. This is about keeping the integrity of a neighborhood so you know who your neighbors are. That's one of the things that when you have in a neighborhood, you look out for each other. And this, to me, is opening up our neighborhoods for folks. You don't even know what's really going on in there. I'm having trouble with it.
Okay, let's keep with questions, please. Mr. Abel, you had a follow-up, and then we'll just keep going, and then Ms. Harrison.
I had a question for Ms. Spencer and her comments about her large force of 4 agents. I think you already have a full plate. Would it be wise of us to add to code enforcement agent staff if we go with this?
At this point, it'd be difficult to say what those needs would be as far as resources. But I can say in 2010, when the RV ordinance changed, our calls for that parking went up almost 100%.
Maybe I should put it this way. Are you already overworked or understaffed? As diplomatically as you can put it.
Sure. And I have no doubt to say this, if at points, and I've even told this to the chief, if there is the need when we look at our stats during certain times of year, yes. But to look at that overall on a broader perspective, yeah, if we see the uptick and where it keeps going up statistically, and for that need, sure. What we are seeing, though, is some of these that take more time, and that's another part of the factor when we look at our stats, is to see how long we're spending on some of these. Some we can just go, and it takes maybe a couple of visits, and then we close the case.
Some other issues may be a little bit more weighty and require more of your time, I would imagine. Do we currently inspect hotels, motels, especially those that serve coffee and crawlers or B&Bs? Do we inspect those at all?
We do not.
Okay. So these would be no different. The number of people in an Airbnb at any one time, is there any way at all that we could regulate that?
I would say if that was the wish of the council, and if it was, excuse me, put into the ordinance, that we have currently in the household portion of the zoning ordinance that you can't have more than 5 unrelated. That is something probably staff would need to get with legal and look at how the impacts are there, because when you start talking renting out, I have a 5-bedroom house and I want to rent out 4 rooms, as Councilor Frank said. That's something that probably needs to be shook out a little more.
Okay. The use of ADUs doesn't seem to be consistent with the idea of the primary residence only, although if you're a renter and it's your primary residence, that would fit in under the proposed language, but would it be possible to limit that to the primary residence on the parcel as opposed to a smaller rental unit that's in addition to the primary residence?
That's something I think other agencies have done, and I believe Ms. Bravo can speak a little bit more to that with her research that she did.
Please.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something you can write in. It may be difficult to enforce, as a lot of these can be. There's a lot of items that come along with short-term rentals that can be difficult to enforce, but if it's something that you want to restrict, I think I did a quick calculation of our ADU permits. We've got 12 in the city, and I think we could add language in if it's something that you guys would like to do. And if it's not something that you think is too impactful, then we could leave it out. It would be up to you to give us that direction.
Okay. And again, some other cities do require notification to neighbors when one of these things start up.
So some of them do. A lot of cities that have adopted policy more recently have opted not to because of the cost to the city of the notifications. And then obviously then your neighbors, that, you know, if you don't want your neighbor to be doing it, it kind of causes this conversation where if you're operating under the guise of the licensing and the policy, you may not know anyone's operating an Airbnb next to you. But it would be something, so right now at this time, just based on the financials and the sort of workload that would bring into the city to notify of every license, I think we opted not to provide that as a recommendation. But again, these are all things we're looking for direction on.
Is it possible that notifying neighbors would cut down on the number of calls to police for folks seeing strangers going in and out of the house next door?
I think it could go both ways. Yeah.
Can I follow up on that? Could the notification cost be borne by the applicant though? So it's not a city cost?
I think if we could figure out where, you know, what our buffer would be for the notification, we could wrap that into the licensing cost.
Into the fee structure. And I don't know who's best suited to answer this, but what other services does iCompass offer? Don't everybody volunteer.
I'll have to actually look to remember.
Just in general,
they offer compliance as well, but it's only compliance with the fact that someone does or does not have a license. It's not, they wouldn't comply with everything in our proposed ordinance. Let me look here. They offer, the compliance monitoring, the address identification, which is what we asked for, mobile registration, rental activity monitoring, and a 24/7 dedicated hotline.
But is there anything in that package that would perhaps take the load off of code enforcement or otherwise save us money by using their resources instead of ours?
I don't believe so.
Thank you. And the 24/7 monitoring, that was my other question. The recommendation is to provide a 24/7 local emergency contact. Would that person have the option or the authority to ask someone to vacate the premises? If you go to a motel and you cause a disturbance, they can ask you to leave. If the operator is not in town, obviously that can't be done. Leaving our officers with either, detaining people or just leaving them there with a citation or less. So is this 24/7 emergency contact the concept to have them, give them that authority?
Full authority over the rental.
Thank you. I would like to say that, if I might comment, Mayor, instead of a question, that this is a very good presentation. It's a very thorough look at this thing, and makes our job a lot easier. Thank you very much for all the work all the departments have put into it.
Notice he didn't ask. He kind of asked, but just...
I said, is it okay? That's a question.
All right.
Prelude.
I have Miss Harrison, Mr. Roybal, and then Miss Gutwein.
Thank you, and it is an excellent presentation. My first question is, who's considered the owner of the primary residence? Did you establish that? And I should preface a couple of things. We've had, to my knowledge, only one situation in Ward 5, and the situation was the sister lived in a home and rented out the location. And the sister wasn't on the deed or anything like that, but she was the one that was actually, quote unquote, taking care of the home. So we were notified that they were concerned about what was happening at this particular location. Several neighbors turned it in. First of all, they noticed that there were lots of cars going in and out. So, you know, I think the idea of notification is important for the surrounding neighbors, because they don't know, when they see all these cars, they don't know what's going on. Has it turned into a drug house or something else? They're concerned. And the concern about primary owner is a real concern. If I can buy a house and then have one of my kids live in from time to time and then rent it out, is that really... I don't like that idea. I think primary owner probably needs to be the people that are living there all the time, not my daughter or my sister or whatever. So can you tell me about that?
Sure. And I think there's two different types of primary residence. Your owner, or it's you're the owner that lives on site for 6 months or more out of a year, or you're renting for 6 months or more out of the year in that location. So you wouldn't be an off-site. If I was the owner of the house, but I had someone leasing my property long-term and they did the Airbnb, that would technically be them. They're the primary resident of that house. And so they would, with owners be able to participate in short-term rentals.
Okay.
And Councilwoman Harrison, we talked about, one of the things you asked was, how do you prove ownership? And we talked about that quite a bit, and it would be by deed.
Okay.
It would be through the property records at the county that we would.
Okay. So if what would can a renter actually, by this definition, now I know we said owner, but you also said renter, allow rental of primary residence only. So I rent an apartment and it's got a really beautiful view. I've decided that I can't afford my rent, but I could couch surf for a week or two, and I could rent out my apartment. Is that doable?
With the approval of the owner.
So I'd have to have that approved by the apartment, whoever owns it or rents it to me. What happens if I don't?
Then you're in violation.
And tell me what those teeth look like.
So, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. If it's in the ordinance and it's written in there and they didn't go through the process, then it stalls it as far as they need to stop. We give them a notice. They would be within their right to come in, get the owner's information or the owner's permission to do that if they're a renter and they're the primary resident there. So they would just have to comply with the licensing feature.
And I think the original idea of Airbnb actually came from that very situation where some gentleman couldn't afford their apartment and chose to have an air mattress, Airbnb. That was actually part of the original idea. I know I've been approached by some seniors that are very interested in this, and as an additional way to help keep them in their homes. Physically, they're fine. They have children here, but yet they've got a great big old home that they're not ready to sell and yet want to stay there. So this would allow them if we talk about affordable homes, this creates a stream of income, an additional stream of income for them to be able to stay in their own homes. So even though it kind of makes me a little nervous to think about, I think if we had good communication with surrounding neighbors and could eliminate some of the fear factor, it might help some seniors. So thank you.
I might add to that too, that we talked quite a bit about the education component of this a lot. You know, I mean, I truly believe that those 338 that are out there right now are unaware that they are doing it illegally, or that we don't have something in our zoning ordinance. And the phone calls that we've been receiving, and I'm assuming the majority of those 330 some also want to do it right. That's why they're calling us. They want to know, do we license them? What do they have to do to be able to do this? So
my last comment is that it's going to be really, 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 really important for the city to require that there's extra insurance in place. Not all homeowners policies and not all renters policies would provide that additional liability of having quote unquote strangers, because it changes it from being homeowners to a business, because now we've created a business, and that's not always covered under a homeowner's policy. So that'll be really important to make sure that we've got that additional coverage in place. Thank you.
And I think possibly some of the companies that those platforms offer the additional insurance for the renting folks. Mr. Roybal.
Councilor Harrison, you answered one of my questions I was going to ask, and that was the insurance component. The other one that I want to go ahead and elaborate a little bit, we do have some neighbors in the city, and I'd like to make a recommendation that we reach out to the fire department and ask for their wisdom and see what they think of these recommendations and get some input from them. So that's all I have.
Thank you. So then I have Gutwein, Vincent, LeBeer, and then we'll start the second round.
Thank you for your presentation. It was really informative, and I think helped answer a lot of the questions that we had the first time around. Just a couple quick more questions. If we do license, HOAs can still have an additional ban on top of if they choose? Yes. Okay. Thank you. And if we license, what will the process be? So we could contract with the third party, we'd get the list of who is operating an Airbnb, and then we would reach out to them and say, you need to have a license, and
send them an application and follow up.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And then if they didn't comply, then we would just follow up again, or okay. All right, that was it.
Thank you. Ms. Vincent.
Yeah. I need to understand. So this is short-term rentals. Where or how is a distinction made between short-term rentals and a B&B? Because a short-term rental doesn't have to have anybody in it. Usually a B&B is a host family. And that, to me, is a business, a separate type of business. You're all looking at each other.
That's okay. I just don't want to overspeak. So I agree. Bed and breakfast is a business. You can serve food on site, and most of the times it's written in there, and I believe in our ordinance, it's written in that the owner has to live on site, or the management folks have to live on site. Someone has to be there providing those services. They can't provide out, catering they can't cater out of that home. It's a strictly, small bed and breakfast. This is different. Bed and breakfast also have to comply with different building code standards. Airbnbs is a house and you're renting out. So it's a much sort of smaller scale. It's still a business, but it's not a minor home business. Let's not go there, but it is different from a building code standpoint. That's not my forte, but I do know that. And typically, you're not always there. you can be there if you want to rent out one of your rooms, but you could also rent out your entire house. I don't believe there's any requirement for anything less than 30 days or anything like that. For bed and breakfast, you rent for however many nights you want to stay. And you could put limitations on it yourself as an Airbnb host. But I think the biggest difference is probably just sort of not using the bed and breakfast isn't a primary residence. It's not your home necessarily. It's functioning more as a business, where the thought behind an Airbnb is that you're living there and you're just, using as your single family home, but you're inviting folks in on occasion to spend the night.
Thank you.
Councilor, Mr. LeBeer.
So this is we would be licensing these places, right?
Right.
And this would be a revocable license where you could pull it if there's issues.
Correct.
Do we have set triggers or anything that would help define that, like X amount of noise violations or something like that?
We don't have those currently in place, but it's something we've talked about. And once we put together the complaint process and the hearing process, we'll put some of those guidelines in place afterwards, so we know if it's, 3 strikes you're out, or it really most of the time depends. And if we take it to a hearing officer, and the hearing officer, it kind of depends on, how bad the issue is. So you hate to put, just say 1, 2, 3, you're out. It could be very minor violations versus something more substantial.
Right. And I've actually stayed in some Airbnbs that were like houses that were divided up into sections, and doors were locked in certain ways, so you couldn't go into certain sections of the house. Is that something we'd be doing here?
That's up to the individual homeowner and their
Okay.
lease with the renter.
Okay, great, thanks.
So I noticed in the background, so Wheat Ridge has started to go in and look, or has. Edgewater's another one that wasn't on our list. I think Edgewater has adopted as well an ordinance probably about a year ago. My question has to do with fees. So if they're subject to the lodger's tax, that is debruced in the city, correct? Our lodger's tax. Pretty sure it is. However, we base our fees on staff time. And so if we're ramping up, if this were to go through and do fees, those fees are subjected to Tabor. So lodger's tax, I think, is not, and the other fees that you would be charging for compliance would be subjected to Tabor.
I'm not the Tabor expert. I don't know.
No, that's cool. But I think we should keep that in mind as we also keep talking about this. And then do you know if Nashville is primary? Do you recall if it's primary residence in Nashville?
They allow both.
They allow both.
Primary and non.
Okay. So I was just there and toured one, stayed in one. And, they have actually the city ordinance posted. So there's those requirements. But talking to the owner for them, and I think it's more common in that type of market how they're doing it. This particular house, they were cash flowing $90,000 a year off of their Airbnb.
Mm.
So, I mean, it's quite interesting. And, when you look at primary versus non-primary and the kind of money that can be made in different markets. Mr. Beat Up.
You stole my thunder. I wanted to know about Tabor, and you got the answer. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Franks?
Thanks again, Mayor Paul. I really loved hearing about the education component. I think there's 2 sides to that. Of course, there's educating the folks who are running that, but there's also education on maybe through the lease or through the listings. The things that would be concerning to me is we have, ordinance on the books for, like, say, 5 maximum pets per household. And so you have situations where you can have like if I'm renting out rooms in my house, I may have 3 of my own pets, and then I may allow other pets. And so I'm just wanting us to at least be cognizant that we may be bumping up against some of these other limits that then cause overflow frustrations in the neighborhood. So we'd want some kind of educational component to make sure people were aware, if we decide to go forward with what the rules are around everything from maximum pets, total number of vehicles. Like right now for a single family home, we have 7 maximum vehicles. That includes up to 2 inoperable, includes back and side yards, etc. And I think duplexes it's 4. So what we don't want to see happen, or what I don't want to see happen, is somebody who already has a lot of cars, then who just moves all of theirs to the street, opens up, and then ends up with, excessive cars, because we know that's already a concern. So from the education, I think we've got to kind of find some ways to make sure that we are not exasperating other problems by way of this. The other thing is, when you can have the person who maybe is in the home and just renting a room or 2, and then you can also have them renting out the whole house, they may have people coming in from states who don't know about the obligations of snow removal and those types of things. So we'd have to find an education component for that, because it would be unfortunate to have somebody slip and fall on a property where the people did not know it was their responsibility to take care of if there was no owner-occupied person there. So I think the education component is important. I also think there's the possibility for renters who are renting more than 6 months of the year to maybe not get the owner's approval. And so we should have a mailing address for the deeded owner generally. And so I think there's a way to, at least once a year, since we'll know who's engaging in this, to send a notice to the registered owner if it's not listed the same address, to make sure they're aware their property is being rented out and they're in compliance. So I think those are all important things that we can do. The other thing I wanted to mention is, it is important to also note that there is an upside to the people want to get good ratings on Airbnb. They want to have their property be sought after. And so the upside of some of this activity can be the properties improve, the landscaping improves, the exterior improves. So I know it can sometimes be seen as just a complete negative, but you're also helping folks stay in an area that they may not be able to stay in. You're possibly helping aesthetics-wise. And over time, if there's too many complaints, there's just a natural social aspect to this, that if your property's desirable, you're going to be able to attract good, desirable folks to that property. So while I have some concerns, and I think we have a lot of detail to work out to make sure we've got a process in place that we can live with, I did want to mention that there are some significant upsides. You start to see properties that are very well improved, lots of good amenities, and that's the upside.
Councilwoman Franks, if I could speak to the first part of your conversation about making sure that the renters or the leasers knew about local laws. One of the things we talked about as far as the application process is that they have to give us a brochure that they also give to their renters, and it states some of the local laws in there regarding snow removal, when and where trash is picked up, and how long the trash cans can be outside, and all of those sorts of things, ensuring that they meet some fire and safety standards as well. So we're talking about having them present a brochure that's part of their lease and also part of their application to us. Mm-hmm.
So I have Ms. Gutwein, Ms. Harrison, Mr. Skilling, Mr. Abel, and Mr. LeBear.
Thank you. So I think that here's a couple of things that I would like to see as we move forward. I think we should explore looking at caps. It could be per bedroom. I think it's a fire and safety issue. And I know that to some extent the market kind of provides caps, because I've stayed in Airbnbs many times and love it. And there's a certain amount, when you're looking at the house and there's 2 bedrooms, you're not going to try to fit 12 people there, and that kind of takes care of that. But I think we should also have caps in place, I think we should increase the parking requirement. Sometimes, so for example, I have stayed with another family and we rented one unit, one house. So it would have been one agreement from the owner to one of us, and we stayed within the cap, but that meant 2 cars. So I think that it should be somehow related to the number of people that are staying there instead of just a per agreement fee. I think we may want to look at using the compliance checks. It seems with the third party, it seems like that could be a benefit. I like the additional insurance requirements. I like the conversation about the well-defined violation process and just having that really clear so that it's understandable if I have this kind of violation, we're getting revoked for 90 days or whatever, so that people understand up front. And then finally, I think it's exciting. I think this is part of just participating in the modern economy. This is just the way things are going. I think people want to have this opportunity. It's a lot of cash flow. Along what Councilor Franks was saying, the ones that I've stayed in have been very, very nice. So it's I think you will see some improvements. And then the other thing is that I did a quick search on Airbnb. One of the cities listed, I think it was Arvada, that does not allow them. There's still over 300 that operating, and so it's just, to me, this is a way that we can better track what's happening, make sure that there's rules, better enforce those rules, and of course the side benefit of participating in the tax, and getting that tax funds. So thank you very much.
Ms. Harrison.
Thank you. I just had one comment. In the brochure, in the agreement, if we would identify clearly what the rules are for marijuana use. I think a lot of people coming from out of state will be very excited about our laws, and I think we need to make sure they understand where the structure is. Thank you.
It's on our list.
We're getting some silent shakes out there. Mr. Skilling.
So a couple of comments I had. I'll talk about the downsides because I did read earlier the iCompass, and I did laugh at the quotes that they included there. They had the little girl about the beer pong and the people. So the heading on that is interesting because it says short-term rentals can the bad news. Displace long-term tenants, something we're struggling with housing now. So now all of a sudden you might have tenants who've been there a long time and now can't be there. So that's a downside. Alter the neighborhood character, raise legitimate parking, noise, safety, trash, and fairness concerns. So basically everything that this council has been talking about and struggling with, this brings us more of. So I'm struggling to see why this would be something that we would be excited about, especially because, to the mayor's point, about if there's some Tabor implications, if we're not even reaping the benefits of the fees, you go to the economic chart where they use San Diego as a comparison, which that's somewhat of a misnomer. I don't think you can use San Diego as a comparison with us with these numbers. But even using their numbers, the city's share of the sales tax was $56 out of the total economic impact that they state of close to $35,000. So as a city, I'm not seeing how we benefit from having this, unless we make the licensing fee so high that it somehow dramatically changes our coffers. I don't know how we get there. So I guess my question would be, not even a question, maybe it's just a comment / question. Why is this something, and I'm not really saying we should or shouldn't at this point. I think there's a lot more to look at, but I'd like to hear why we should do this. And I'm not going to be sold on the affordability part or any of that, because I think the displacement of long-term renters offsets that. So why is it that we want to do this?
Mr. Abel?
Part of the answer to that, Mr. Skilling, I think, is that it would help some folks who are struggling to stay in their home now, more able to afford to stay there. But when people stay in a home, then that's one more home that doesn't go back on the market. So it's kind of a cycle with no real answer. Ms. Greer, do you intend to require evidence of owner approval at application time so that renters would have that evidence right up front?
Absolutely.
Okay. Secondly, and this might not go over well with my conservative friends, but as far as Tabor goes, is it possible to have a surcharge on the tax that we charge in order to cover the application, licensing, and regulation, or any of that?
I don't believe so. I don't think that's possible under Tabor.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. LeBear.
I just had a short question. I was just wondering, did any of these cities have any safety requirements, like carbon monoxide detectors, fire detectors? I think
that's part of what we're the list of things that we would have in that brochure is that, and part of the application process is that they have to have and show where the fire extinguishers are in the house, carbon monoxide, all of it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I was going to ask that question too. That's a good question. I am, I'm really conflicted on this because it's the property rights of the person that owns the house. And I frankly don't care if somebody wants to rent out their bedroom versus the property values in the neighborhood of the other people that it could potentially affect. Regarding safety issues. And I really appreciate the education components you have, particularly regarding the marijuana, because I think that will attract a lot of people here just for that one thing alone. But the reality is, there still can be a lot of folks in and out of a neighborhood that you don't know. And for me, this is not an economic development thing as much as it is protecting the integrity of our neighborhoods. People really like to know who's living next to them. And I think it's somewhat unnerving when you know that a home is being cycled out all the time and you don't really know who's there. And I think that Lori brought a good point to the table here regarding the townhomes and condos, but it sounds like the HOA would supersede this. Okay.
Good.
Right. Okay. I would also like to see us look at some of the best practices that CML has, particularly that that has to be a primary residence, at least for the owners, for 9 months, and this doesn't become
9 months instead of 6 is what you're looking at?
Personally, I think that that's what, if that's a best practice, I'd like to see us do that. And I agree that the number of people coming into this needs to have a cap on it. That's also part of best practices. And again, it was talking about owner registration as a way to, or voter registration to prove that. I still have a lot of questions and concerns about this, and before we would actually go forward with anything, I think we really need to get more community input. Take this to our ward meetings and find out where folks are coming from. This is not just an issue for us up here to be deciding. I guess that's it. Thank you.
So, well done. All great stuff. Appreciate the research. All great questions up here. What I would encourage, I think, is you heard a mixture of things. There wasn't real consensus on, whether it should be 6 months or 9 months or one parking spot or two. let's gather what you heard, and where there are those, we can bring that back and have that conversation to tune in to what those discrepancies might have been. Yes, sir.
I'd suggest bringing us a number options.
Yep.
With a resolution or ordinance, so that we can pick and choose,
And I
without
certainly
having to make a lot of amendments.
Yep. And I think it looks like you are capturing a lot of that. Okay. Mr. Beta?
I don't think we're anywhere close to that, Councilman Abel. I think it's fine if they want to come back and refine this a little bit. But then, as they recommended, the next step is to notify the community, get it out there, start getting input from the community. And that's going to be long before we start drafting ordinances, or even if we draft ordinances at all. I think until we get a feel for what our communities want, I think we're nowhere. I have no problem saying let's take it out there. Let's see what the folks are thinking on this. And I agree with a lot of the comments that, there may be some advantage to some of our folks who are struggling in their homes, and this would be a chance to supplement their income. I could see that. But I also agree that we don't want to be turning our neighborhoods into a commercial zone either. So we're going to have to walk that line if in fact this even goes forward.
I agree with that. I'd like to see a large public input process. We've had 2 folks come and speak to us tonight. We did bring this up in our Ward 1 meeting last month, but I would like to also get a step up on, there are 330 some odd people out there operating their homes without approval of city regulation, and I think that the sooner we decide whether we want to implement, or whether we want to allow this or not, and how we want to implement it, the better. So I think staff would, we would be well served if staff in moving toward the larger community input process put some options out there for the community to comment on.
Yep. So, and I would echo that. I mean, you essentially have 350 folks that we might even know of, could be more than that, kind of operating in the shadows. And we don't really know what that is. The shared economy it's new. My personal life has been affected, in my own business, and probably a negative way, by a company called Uber, but that's the way things are progressing. And Councilor Skilling asked, you tell me why. I mean, I have the concerns about the fees, certainly. So I want to understand more of that. This is also property rights and enhancement of people's opportunity to do with their property as they see fit within some decent parameters. So I'd like to some consensus to at least move forward with more of a public process, and essentially taking what you've heard tonight and looking at some draft language with the different options where you've heard some of the council members talk about different ideas. Is there consensus on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm getting a consensus. Is that clear as mud? Or
on our next steps, we did have doing something out on the website as part of the community engagement tool that we have. Yeah. Would it be something where we could maybe put a survey with options together and put it out there and see what the feedback is? With the first question being, would you like them or not? And if so, then list the options that we've talked about tonight.
That'd be good. So I'm getting consensus,
okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to also ask or request if you can give us all the lists that you have, to the recommendations, so we can take them directly to our ward meetings and ask them directly also, if that is possible.
So we'll be essentially, we could have something like this, or more of a draft ordinance of what you think that's going to look like, or the key points that we can get out on the website, we can get out in the Friday reports, we can get out on Lakewood Together and do some survey. Fair? Okay. All right. Any question, any follow-up? Great. Mr. Goldstein, you cool? All right. Thank you. Well, it's 8:45 and we're at the
I
end
have
of our
9
agenda,
o'clock in the
so
pool.
I don't know. I don't know what we should do with ourselves for the next 3 hours. Let's go to reports. I'll start all the way on my left. Mr. LeBeer.
Well, we have a little pool going on what time this will end, so mine's 9:30, so I'm gonna have to drag this out for a little bit. Not I don't have any reports other than we had a productive, so I guess I do have a report. We had a productive budget and audit meeting, I think, where we talked about Tabor and some of the amount of money that we're going to refund this year and some of the recommendations that the committee is going to bring to the council. So that should be a fruitful and interesting discussion. So just want to throw that out there. And other than that, I don't have anything to report. So thanks.
Mr. Abel?
Yes, sir. I had the pleasure of attending 2 high school graduations this week. Wheat Ridge High School on Friday, Lakewood High School Saturday. I'd like to thank Principal Joshua Cooley at Wheat Ridge, which serves many of our northern Lakewood residents, and Principal Dan Bach at Lakewood High School for their kind mention of our attendance. And Thursday I'm going to Longview High School's graduation. But the exuberance displayed by these graduates is remarkable. And look out world, here they come. And boy, are they ready. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
I just wanted to report 2 things. First of all, attended an urban renewal class a couple weeks ago. I didn't get an opportunity to say how much I learned about the urban renewal process again. Even though I've been on council for a while, it's always really good to hear it again and again and again because of the fact that we forget. So that was a very interesting class held in Fort Collins. And speaking of Tabor and all the questions that go along with us, our Ward 5 meeting will be June 2nd. Is that right? Okay, June 2nd. Suddenly I had a freeze thought in my brain that said that was the wrong date. The first Saturday in June, 9 a.m. at Bear Valley Church, we will have Larry Dorr coming to speak about municipal funding. Of course, it will include the discussion of Tabor, what's good and what's bad and how it works and what do we need to do. So if those of you who would be interested, we'd love to have you. We are going to have a little bit larger room. So we're pretty excited about having that discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Skilling?
No report.
Ms. Gutwein?
No report.
We'll go all the way down. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I'd also like to mention that on June 2nd, Ward 1 is having our meeting. We're going to do something that we've never done before. We're actually going to have a picnic. Charlie's going to barbecue some brisket. We're going to have some hamburgers and hot dogs, and we just asked folks to bring side dishes and desserts. It'll be at Meadowlark Park from 11 to 1, an informal time for people to get acquainted. And then also, I've mentioned it to everybody up here this Thursday, from 7 to 9 in the Lakewood PM in the Lakewood Police Department Municipal Court Building. Jason Dickerson, who was with Army Intelligence in South Korea, is going to come and talk about his understanding and perception from one soldier's perspective regarding the situation in Korea. He has a very powerful PowerPoint. This is not a political agenda at our level. There's certainly a lot going on in D.C., and he's got a message that will blow you away, really. And I hope that you will come and bring your friends again Thursday from 7 to 9 in the LPD building. Thank you.
Vincent?
Yeah, I've had this report for a couple weeks, but it was late. Nobody was up. I've had the pleasure, I was asked, and I attended the Jefferson County Open School as they gave their presentations before they graduated. And it was just a wonderful experience. And then Counselor LeBur and myself, down there, my co-counselor, we got to go to Jefferson Senior High School, and they did some presentations on how to correspond with government officials and maybe get things on the agenda. One of which I told them that we were very interested, and they were going to write to the Lakewood City Council, but it got directed to the county commissioner on a tobacco ordinance, which I know was very passionate with some people up here. So that should be coming. So it was a wonderful experience.
Mr. Beta.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'll be attending the graduation ceremonies of my alma mater tomorrow morning, Alameda High School. So I'm looking forward to that. Secondly, we have decided to cancel our ward meeting on Saturday so that our folks can enjoy their Memorial Day holiday uninterrupted. That's all.
Go Pirates. Nothing from Mr. Roybal.
No report. It's already been said.
All right. So I want to thank Jay Hutchison for coming out to the WCCA meeting. He gave a great presentation to the business community on North Dry Gulch. On Saturday, we laid Mayor Hogan to rest, and that was a very nice service honoring Mayor Hogan for his 30-plus year career serving the metro area of the state of Colorado and the city of Aurora. I want to thank all of our volunteers and our 65-plus police agents who helped make the Colfax Marathon another success. Our running team, we had some late in the game injuries, mental and physical, so we couldn't quite make it out this year, but we will be there next year. I want to wish everybody a happy Memorial Day. We will not be here. And on Thursday from 3 to 5 at the Lakewood Elks Club, there'll be a transportation forum, and that'll be a discussion about the many different initiatives that could be out there for transportation funding. So Senator Zenzinger from Arvada will be there to speak about the state. I'll be speaking about a potential state sales tax. John Caldera will be there to talk about another state initiative that he's looking at, and I think there's one other speaker. So come out if you want to get an update on all of that. Had the great opportunity to attend Green Gables Elementary's 50th anniversary. So that was a lot of fun in the neighborhood. A lot of people came out for that. And with that, that's all I have. So anything else, Ms. Greer, Mr. Graham, Mr. Goldstein, our Deputy City Attorney, hanging out with us tonight? Thank you, sir. Nothing? No words of wisdom? Here, say something.
No report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, the Sergeant, for keeping us safe, and we will adjourn at 8:54 p.m. on Monday, May 21st.